plan, which really gets at, how the city facilities infrastructure plays into supporting the community through hubs and other things. And so, this topic very much aligns with thinking about healthy buildings and where these sheltering sites are. And I know it's on the
Absolutely.
mind of our folks who are leading that. But so as you think about intersection points where these recommendations can land, I would flag that one as well, because, as we think about, you mentioned libraries, rec centers, our, site at the Alpine Balsam, and how those can play in supporting the community during fire events and air quality concerns, I think would be a great place for the EAB to provide some recommendations on as well.
That's great.
Just a question here for Marion, I guess. I'm on the site on a different computer right now, and I'm looking at the Purple Air. One of the sites that's sometimes it appears in the traces. You click on a site, you'll get a time series of the last 5 days or so. You can choose longer, I suppose. And the David Skaggs Research Center, which is where I work, is always plotted on there, I guess because they have we have in that lab an advanced instrumentation and monitoring capability.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just looking here, for instance, at the last 4 days. I'm looking at the time series of 3 different stations I've chosen. And there's a huge disparity between these time series. And I don't know what to make of this. And I wonder, I guess even a technical person like me, I look at this and I puzzle over, well, what is this telling me about the air quality?
So again, are you looking at the Purple Air site?
Yeah, I'm on the Purple Air site.
They're very subject to where the monitors are sited, and some are not sited well. Another thing that came up was that you can set your Purple Air monitor for either indoor or outdoor use, and people set them up incorrectly. Like they'll set up an outdoor one as an indoor one, a use monitor, and so your data is skewed because of that. So there is definitely room for error, and that is.
I'm looking at a couple of time series just for the last 5 days. I'm scratching my head because some of them say that we had, beyond 200 parts, on the PM scale for the 2.5.
Well, maybe somebody had a fire going in their backyard for an outdoor barbecue. I don't know.
Yeah, but this is one of these important questions, right?
Yeah.
How to educate people to how to look at this data and make sense of it so they can make well-informed decisions off of what they see.
So go to the Air Now website and look at those same 3 monitors and see what you see.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is probably where would we send them? I don't think we would send them to the Purple Air site. We would probably want to send them to the Now site.
Yeah, I think that was something the county had flagged, I think, is making sure you have the right filter set on that because of especially the PM measurements. It overestimates the concentration of fire component of the larger particulates.
That's right, yeah.
A big false positive, huh?
Yes.
Interesting. That makes sense from what I'm looking at. Thank you.
So let's keep moving now, because I just want to make sure we can have enough time for the rest of the evening's conversations. But I think Heidi, if we could just capture in the notes that we're going to definitely set up another time maybe in March, maybe in April to talk about the air quality pieces and develop some recommendations. So this goes into I can think Justin and I can take the next 2 topics kind of together. So as I think
thanks, Carolyn.
Pardon me?
You bet. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn.
We'll see you next month.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as we've said before, we have a date with council, a study session to talk about the new climate action goals and plan. And that's going to be, I can't remember the date in May, but it's in May. So we always have to work backwards from that with document production and public input and so on. In, I think, a previous meeting, this board suggested, maybe with Susan or others, that it would be great to meet with other boards about this. And that's very much in keeping with what EAB has done in the past. based on where we are with the production of this document, we wouldn't be ready for a sort of multi-board meeting around this until April, essentially. So one of the things we need to determine is if we call for a joint board meeting, whether this board wants to meet twice in April or whether it simply wants to meet as a part of that joint board meeting. We will probably have to find a date that is not, well, we certainly will have to find a date that's not when you regularly meet, because planning board also meets at the same time. And so it wouldn't be able to attend a joint board meeting, and they're one of the boards you usually meet jointly with. So,
Planning board meets on Thursdays, I thought.
oh, I'm sorry, it's landmarks that meets the same time that you do. Yeah, that's right. So in any event, assuming that we are moving towards a sort of joint board meeting, then next month's meeting will be the first meeting that we actually do with any of the advisory boards about the climate action plan that we're working on. So we'll get some kind of a draft out to you. It will be an early stage draft, which is great. We want to bring that to you as early as possible in the process. But just to think, I'm thinking out loud here a little bit. So we will need probably a significant amount of time for that in the March meeting. And then if we want to bring electrification into that, I think that's probably going to be as much time as we have in that March agenda. So.
Well, it seems like those two would dovetail well, assuming electrification is likely a big part of the city's climate plan and focus.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, but it also means that we'll need to do a little bit of planning together about how to manage the joint board meeting in April. So Heidi, as we're thinking about the notes for tonight, we'll have those two topical discussions plus the discussion about planning for that joint board meeting. I think I wanted to double check to make sure that you all are interested in and game to try to do a joint board meeting in April, because I'll need to start moving on that immediately. Is that something you're all good for?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll tell you who we typically meet with when we have joint board meetings around this stuff. I mean, in this case, it might be even more because it is the sort of climate action plan in general, but Parks and Rec, Water Resources Advisory Board, Planning Board, Landmarks Board, Open Space and Mountain Parks.
Tab.
Pardon me? Oh, TAB, of course, right? Transportation Advisory Board. I think that's the ones we most often cover. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll start reaching out to the staff liaisons and all those boards and try to get something on the calendar for probably mid-ish April.
Great.
Are you all, how do you feel like if we had our, I mean, the advantage to having the April meeting and then having a joint board meeting in mid-April would be that we would be able to actually do some planning together and think about how we're going to facilitate and manage that board meeting. Are you all game to do 2 meetings in April so that we can have a little bit of planning time?
Yes, I would support that.
Okay. The other good thing about that is that we will have the new board member joining in April too. And so it would be very nice to give them a little bit of an orientation before they get thrown into a joint board meeting. So, okay, very good. So Heidi, we'll go ahead and plan on having a regular board meeting in April as well as the joint board meeting. Good.
Is it a given that we're going to have a new board member, or is Justin
Yeah.
reapplying?
I'm retiring.
You're retiring. Okay.
You're too young.
I wish I wasn't.
Your hair's not white enough.
Well, and to that point, we don't necessarily need to determine this tonight, but we will have to determine this by next meeting. With Justin stepping down, our succession plans have been a bit turned upside down because of all the ways the positions have been truncated because of people filling spots. So the person with the least remaining period of time is usually the person who steps into the chair role, so that when they sort of transition out as chair, they also are transitioning off the board. And that would then land with Mr. Horling as our next potential chair.
Hurling, like hurling a baseball.
Horling, I'm sorry. So Marty, are you open to serving as chair?
Of course I'm not. But it sounds like you need to have a chair.
We
But
do-
I thought Mike was intending to do it.
Yeah, that
Well,
was from, I mean, he was supposed to do it and then I took it from him. So I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I agree. It's sort of Marty's the next in line, but
Mike will have his
I might
chance
be very
again.
disappointed.
See, Mike will then be back into the sequence to be the chair following Marty.
Okay.
So just if it goes as it's sort of sequenced to go, it would be Marty, then Mike, then you, Miriam, and then Susan.
Okay.
Well, you'll just let me know what you want me to do.
Okay, good. Well, I'm delighted that you aren't completely resisting because we would love to have you play in that role.
Nicely done.
So Marty, what we will do is the chair and I always have a sort of agenda meeting the week before the actual ward meeting. So we'll set up something to make sure it's okay with you, Marty, to join Justin and I for the March meeting.
That's
Then
pretty much
we
your
have to
only
have
responsibility as board chair, Marty.
then we have to have a
Brett.
send off for Justin too.
Oh yes, we'll
Okay.
we'll Heidi and I will figure out some appropriate
Okay.
no pies in the face, I promise.
It's got to be a COVID style send off.
That's
So
right.
Yeah, it'll be a,
There you go.
he'll hire somebody to come to my house and
Right.
We'll give you a good shot in the arm.
Right. Yeah. Maybe even a vaccine.
oh yeah, I'll miss my opportunity to jump the COVID vaccination line as the EAB board member. My continuity of city government.
Right. Worker here. So, well, I think actually that was the majority of what I wanted to cover on the, so there will be something sent out to you in a packet form in this upcoming board meeting for March. So a week ahead, watch for something that will be some very draft version and of what we're working on as a document. I do want to emphasize that the way we're thinking about this document that we're producing is as a kind of more like update than a sort of 3-year plan, partly because we can't do the kind of community engagement we would normally want to do a kind of plan, and partly because I think the sense that we're starting to have in terms of climate action planning is that it's almost more a continuous process. Things are changing so quickly now. It's really almost ridiculous to think that we're going to develop a 3-year plan because everything is going to change so much, even within the context of a year. So just to kind of prepare you that what you're going to get is going to look probably a little bit more like an update with a really strong emphasis on how we need to be shifting our goals based on the new knowledge of where things are at. So good. Heidi, am I forgetting anything that we wanted to make sure we covered tonight?
No, but I don't think so. I think we're good. I guess as we're thinking about the discussion for March to develop recommendations on the air quality piece, if there's any process that we can lay out in advance that will help lead that discussion. I don't know if there's any pre-work we need to do, but just thinking about the best way to have to develop the recommendations at next month's meeting.
Yeah, and what I was just thinking though is that we may want to be able, since the board's willing to meet in April twice, and we're going to have a regular April meeting. Let's do this. Miriam, why don't you and I just make sure we get something on the calendar for after next week to kind of step back from everything we are seeing and decide kind of what we think the next best steps are. And then we can decide whether we want to try to bring that forward in March or April. It may be that we just want to make sure we have plenty of time to really have a good long discussion before we develop that recommendations piece.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, is Carolyn also participating in the regional discussion?
yes, I was planning to be there at least for the majority of the conversation. I have one conflict I have to step away for, but
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
That's great. All right. Well, anything else that the board would like to bring forward tonight? Do you have a little time, Susan?
Yeah, I had 2 issues actually. The first one is you know, we are in a transition with our city manager. And it was recently brought to my attention that when at least the last set of criteria that were shared with that was shared with the public with regard to the city manager requirements didn't really have anything about environment or climate change or selecting a candidate who has any kind of environmental ethic or background or action. And I actually think as an environmental advisory board, we should be making a recommendation to, I don't know if it's council or human resources or whomever that says, hey, we want to make sure you bring somebody in who has some kind of track record in climate action in whatever city they've likely to come from. Because there's nothing in the job description right now that addresses that. And I wondered how other board members felt about that.
I would fully support that if there's some way to relay that to, I don't know, who would we relay that to?
Well, one of the ways, just for the board's information, one of the ways the board can communicate with council is to draft something from the board to council. And then one of the ways in the past anyway, that boards would share that is that they would have a representative go to a city council meeting and during the open comment period say, I'm X representing the so-and-so board and wanted to make sure that you saw this recommendation that we have for you. So you can both send something into them, but then also you could have a board member make sure that that was heard through a public process.
It's funny, I'm just looking at a particular list of qualifications being called for a city manager vacancy. It's not in our community, but it has 6 items on there. 5 years of prior experience in local government, a bachelor's degree in political science, business administration, public administration, or related field. Must possess good character and integrity. Hard to come by nowadays, right? Strong planning skills. Now here you might say, well, that's a pretty broad umbrella. Planning skills could involve, environmental recognition of what you plan around for resilience. Customer-oriented and experience in community development. There's another one. So in other words, just broad lists here that a person could easily fit in and be qualified and without calling out climate explicitly, I guess is all my point.
Yeah, but for this specific community, it seems to me that somebody with a strong environmental ethic for this specific community at this specific time, as you say, Brett, things are changing so quickly right now. Having somebody who has that, in the front of their mind, and we did have qualifications like, we want somebody who has experience in equity and social justice, also an important issue. But I think we need to make them think, hey, we need somebody who's really in tune with this community's desire to be leaders in rebuilding our climate situation.
Can you share, do you have those requirements to share? I guess I'm a little hesitant to vote on something I have I trust Susan's characterization of it, but I haven't read any of or followed any of the cities.
Yeah, what I was just going to say, I haven't seen the requirements since the first draft came out, and then they asked for community input. And I know on my community input, that's one of the things that I said was that I wanted to see more requirements that somebody had taken climate action in the past. But I haven't seen it since then. And I got on the website today and tried to find the requirements and couldn't. So I would suggest the first step would be, Brett, if you could either find the requirements for us or point me to the person who has those requirements. And let's at least first validate that maybe that was added. Maybe they read my feedback and added it. But if it wasn't, then I would be happy to draft a letter that I could circulate.
Susan, it's on the website. I just looked. It's listed as a open job for the city of Boulder, and there's a whole brochure attached to it. So,
I looked today and did not see that.
That's interesting.
Do you see in that, Miriam, any mention of this, or is that something we just need more time to spend?
It's pretty big. City manager position.
Miriam, could you just send the link out?
Can I can do that in Zoom, can I?
I have it here
I'm
too.
ha-
It's
I'm
very
happy
easy.
to pull it up.
Email it, then we can all just click on it.
You just need to do a Google search on City of Boulder, City Manager. It pops
Yeah.
right up. I'm reading it
All
too.
right. Well,
Here's their
all right.
priorities.
then
Wow.
I will take the action to read that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
I,
number one is COVID. How did can this manager deal with COVID in the community?
Yeah,
Very, very high up.
COVID response.
do you see anything about the environment on it?
Yeah, climate change initiatives, that they fully address our climate change initiatives and ensure our quality of life, it says explicitly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good. It's there.
You
And
were
that's
heard, Susan.
Well, hopefully I'm not the only one who brought that up. So,
Right.
looks like it's there. Looks like
Right.
this person
There's
got
an
hired.
even a link to the climate change
Yeah.
initiatives.
Yeah.
You should all thank Jonathan because he also heard you and raised that to the recruiters. So
Oh,
good.
work.
Thank you, Carolyn.
It looks like the person that got hired is going to have to be able to walk on water, consistently bowl 300.
Hey, the second suggestion I have, since that first one happened so quickly, was, we came up with these 5 suggestions for city council, but maybe it's the business person in me. I'm like, okay, are we going to take that the next step to setting some objectives in each of those areas? Because I'm so impressed with the progress that Miriam's made on air quality, and we've kind of got some action going there. But I know I raised my hand and said that I was interested in the Excel partnership, and I applied for that advisory panel today. I won't know until the end of the month whether I got on it. But it seems like in each of those 5 areas, we should have some objectives as a board, so that we aren't just waiting for city council to ask us a question, but rather are, trying to move some initiatives forward. And I don't know that we can establish the objectives tonight, but I wondered how people felt about that.
My only comment really, Susan, on that, I entirely agree about liking to sort of see how we're going to move forward something. You have sort of a very, very big topic, one of the most important to EAB coming forward starting next month, and then essentially the follow-up to that in April. So I think that you will have a big piece of your core work to do in the next couple months. So it might be something to look at post the May meeting with council, when whatever happens with the climate action plan will have been done.
All right. Yeah, I think, I believe in the last meeting, we each sort of chose an area that we were going to be a part of. And, we could each just select some objectives and put them forth to the board and see if people like them. But I'd like to not lose that topic.
The other thing that you had suggested in our last meeting was that we each try to make a tie with one of the other boards.
Yeah, I volunteered for planning board.
Right.
And as Lynn Siegel pointed out, I haven't gone to one of their meetings yet. I just put them all on my calendar. They meet 3 times a month. So I'm going to start being the liaison to planning board unless somebody else wants to do that, because I do think that's a super important one.
Right. And I indicated that I would try to attend some of the transportation board meetings. But I don't know if Marty or Mike had made it. Well, Mike was part of the Greenway Planning Committee.
Yeah, in the Greenway.
Yeah.
I think we should assign Mike to like 3 or 4 boards since he's not here tonight.
Yeah, the ones that meet the most often too.
You don't show up, you get volunteered.
Right. So I don't know. I think, Martin, you can think about if there's another board that piques your interest and you want to participate.
I'm open for a suggestion. I really haven't delved into that. So I appreciate you bringing this up. And if you guys have some board in mind.
I think, Marty, one of the boards, there's 2 that we have strong intersections with, OSMP and Parks and Rec.
Yeah. I think it would be important for us to be involved with open space, certainly, and parks
Like
and
RAB
Rec.
could also fit well into your expertise, Marty.
Yeah.
Which one's that? Which is the other one?
RAB, the Water Resources Advisory Board.
Yeah. Well, let's revisit that particular piece next month where we have both our new board member. Do we have a new board member? No, I guess that's April.
That's April, yeah.
You can at least assign them work before they started next
That's
month.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Brett, do you think, for instance, I'm just going to start going to the planning board meetings. Should I make planning board the chair aware that, you know, I'm interested in issues as they relate to EAB and that I'm going to be there, or just go? Or should Miriam reach out to Tab?
I think it's useful for the other boards to know that there is a desire to be connected. We don't have formal liaison relationships, and I don't anticipate that that's going to be sanctioned or encouraged. But I do think that it's important to try to keep, you know, awareness between them, especially as big issues come through the system.
All right. Maybe I'll just send an email to planning board and introduce myself, and I'll copy you all and just say, just FYI, I'm going to be attending your meetings and maybe raising issues as they relate to EAB.
Thanks for taking that on.
So I think that's it from the stuff that staff wanted to bring forward tonight, Justin.
Great. Was there anything else folks wanted to talk about before we adjourn?
I guess just, do you want us to report? I mean, does the board want me and Brett and Carolyn to report back on this meeting that happens tomorrow? I mean, I can put
Yeah, I
together
mean, I
a
think it would be
summary.
great.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm super
I don't know
interested.
if it's easier to just send an email right after it happens to stay up on it, or if we,
Yeah.
you know, if there's important stuff and it's worth talking about at the next meeting, we could probably carve out some time. But yeah, I'd definitely be interested in, at a minimum, getting an email and just understanding what was said and where things are going.
Okay.
And then maybe we can go from there about that agenda item. It sounds like we might have a pretty packed agenda for March already. But I mean, it seems like if we move, you know, I don't know, I'm outgoing, so you guys don't have to listen to me anymore. But if you're moving forward with spending the work to liaise to all these boards or other groups, that, you know, it'd be good to carve out a standing agenda item to report back at each meeting. So, and discuss what's going on, just so can not lose that, or, you know, so that the board can understand, you know, that we're reporting out and getting some value as a whole board from that work,
Sure.
which is fairly significant effort on folks' part.
I just wanted to raise one thing. You know, in looking at the rate of progress in dealing with energy from renewable and replacing coal and diesel and, you know, dirty fuels that are especially heavy emitters, I think the pace at which this is occurring is catching quite a few people by surprise. You know, you probably heard the GM announcement, very proactive, that they want to replace their gas engine cars with all electric in 15 years. Now, that's aspirational, but they're pretty much dedicated to doing it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they get closer, especially if policy helps them along. The economics of all of this is what's driving a lot of the actions. I think the cost points are making this increasingly more effective to electrify the grid with renewable energy as a source, or certainly remove coal increasingly rapidly from the grid. The thing I don't want to forget, though, is that as an environmental advisory board, we're not just about a climate change environmental advisory board. So, you know, this was really refreshing today to, you know, talk about internal home air quality, having electric replace gas burning stovetops, for instance. But then there are these events that occur, that naturally occur, and they will continue to occur. And this is back to resilience and not letting our guard down, being prepared for the flood or the, which may affect water treatment, especially as communities keep growing and we have less buffers. So a lot of this, as populations naturally grow, we become more exposed to the natural variabilities of the environment, not necessarily to climate change alone. And so it's just awareness of keeping the eye on the ball that natural hazards happen naturally. And sometimes the gaps between a significant hazard may be decades, but a community has moved itself into a vulnerable position that it didn't realize existed because they haven't experienced that hazard. And so I think an EAB also needs to be aware of that and keep that in the crosshairs of things we speak about.
Yeah, Marty, thank you for that. And one of the things that you'll see in the new climate action draft that we're developing is that we're saying climate action now is not just about emissions management, it's about preparing for climate change and climate disruption. And I know, Marty, what you're also calling out, which is irrespective of climate change, there's natural variation and disruption that will endanger our community. So this issue of how are we resilient to change is a really important one. And it's one that we've struggled a little bit in the city to know kind of where it lives, or where, broadly it lives, and also that there isn't necessarily a citizens advisory board watching over the resilience of the community. So I think that you're right to say that this is a unique role for the EAB to play. Well, I do think that a unique feature of Justin Brandt's leadership is that we've more frequently been able to end both on time or even a little bit early. So
I don't know. I think I presided over the only EAB meeting that went well beyond 8. So
that's true.
It's a black mark on my time as chair. I've also only presided over virtual meetings, which are
that's interesting.
Different role. But yeah, I guess if there's nothing else, we can adjourn and see everyone in a month.
Okay.
Was that a bye or a raising your hand, Susan?
No, that's bye.
Okay.
Have a nice evening.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.